Back in October of 19, I decided to go visit Cyprus, and in doing so, I also made a decision to actually see what the occupied part was like just for a few days. So here's a combination of Instagram videos that I put together so you could see exactly what I saw there. I flew into Larnaca Airport, and from there I had to take a bus to get to the capital of Cyprus, the divided capital of Nicosia. So I just arrived by bus to the capital of the Republic of Cyprus, Nicosia, and it's actually the only remaining divided capital. There is the free part, which is where I am right now, and then there's the part that's occupied by Turkey, which is just a bit to the north from where I am right now. Now, as I said before, I made a difficult decision. I decided I would go and take a look at the occupied territory, the occupied city of Kyrenia, where many Greeks were expelled from back in 1974 when the Turkish army came to invade. This is not being done as an attempt to endorse tourism into the occupied area. My main goal there is to just see what used to belong to a united country at one point. Wasn't even divided. It's hard to even say united because it was one country, and then it became occupied by another country. I've talked to a lot of my Greek friends about this and thought carefully about the moral implications of doing something like that. But I feel that since I'm not going there to promote tourism there, I'm going there just to see and experience something. And again, it's one country, essentially. It's just occupied. So I figure it would be okay for me to go and do that. So I'll let you know how that goes. So here is a map showing the crossing. The occupied part is on top, as you can see. And that over there, the green, is the UN buffer zone. That's where the UN buffer zone begins. And then after the UN buffer zone is already the Turkish occupied part. It's a little bit tricky because the UN doesn't like you taking videos and pictures. And if you're on the Turkish side, the Turkish military doesn't like you taking pictures and videos. And I certainly would rather get in trouble with the UN than I would with the Turkish army. Right next to me over here is the UN buffer zone, and after that begins the occupied part that's held by the Turkish army. A lot of very quiet areas here. See some Greek flags raised, painted blue and white in the colors of the Greek flag. You know, cans and all of that stuff. It's a pretty difficult thing to see, to be honest. Here we have an example of a Greek and a Cypriot flag hanging next to each other. Graffiti talking about the divided island. Your wall cannot divide us. It's very eerily quiet here. There's hardly a person here, an occasional car driving by. And you can see the disrepair of the buildings that are in the buffer zone. They just haven't been changed since 1974. So right by this area on the Turkish occupied side, there is a mosque, but you can't see it here because the UN people were already giving me a dirty look. So this flag, I mean, this mural here kind of says it all. I mean, Cyprus is really culturally a part of Greece. The other side is culturally and politically a part of Turkey. And all of this talk of a reunited, demilitarized island, I think that's just good intentions at this point, because realistically speaking, that's not the way it is. And right now, all you can do is peacefully cross between the two parts, and that's considered to be a success, according to many people. Behind me over there is the official Ledra crossing. Shouldn't be called a border, because it's considered to be one country. That's not what the occupying forces, of course, want to call it, but... and a lot of people regularly cross over here. I think within a year they get several million crossings from what I've read. So a lot of people go back and forth. It's cheaper stuff to get back there. So people really, you know, it's an economic thing for a lot of people. They just go there because it's cheaper, it's less developed, it's got an older rustic look. So that's what draws people there a lot. And there's even a notice about bringing counterfeit goods back into the free part, because some people just trade with, you know, cheapo Charlie stuff they get over there, and then they bring it over here. So in a little bit, I'll be doing that crossing, and then I'll have to film there. I'll be going through that UN buffer zone and into the occupied part. So it was that simple. You just walk through, very casually look at your passport, and that's it. So have a lot of shops here. Pretty different character here though compared to the other side. Definitely kind of a smaller feel here. Not as rich of a feel. You know, a lot of counterfeit stuff being sold, which is why they had signs about that further down. Anyway, that's that. This crossing point was the first one to open up back in 2003. Prior to that, from 1974 to 2003, you just couldn't cross. If you wanted to go to the occupied part, you had to go through Turkey pretty much, and if you had a Greek last name, they would not actually let you in. So here you have this bazaar, which definitely looks very, very Turkish. You know, here you got all these trinkets and stuff like that for sale, and books and whatever else. And you can see the UN buffer zone from the other side, and the unmaintained buildings there. But also for this part of Nicosia, the buildings are also very poorly maintained. From what I've been told, they are actually not maintained at all, and that's sort of intentional, and I forgot the reason for that. But here you can see the military outposts that the Turks have. You know, so this kind of a post-1945 Berlin look is intentional from what I've been told. It's not just, you know, there hasn't been any fighting here for over 40 years, so this is just the way the city looks, and I guess that they feel that's part of its charm. You know, I guess that's how they see it. And one thing I've noticed is that a lot of books on socialism and communism are sold. This is taken in Kyrenia, which is a little bit to the north of Nicosia. Here I am in the occupied part of Cyprus, which has been occupied by Turkey since 1974. There's still a very sizable military presence here by Turkey, and a lot of settlers that have been pushed to come from Turkey to live here. And there are also people from other countries that live here as well, because it's very inexpensive here and the views are very beautiful. It's a very controversial subject because Greek Cypriots have been forced out of this part of Cyprus, and without any compensation for their property for the most part. And it's a very emotional issue. I was staying at the house of a family that I've known for many years that's been living here for a few years. We do not agree on the Cypriot issue at all. We're very much at loggerheads when it comes to talking about politics, so we stay away from that subject. But I'm very grateful for them for being such nice hosts and letting me see this part of the country and taking me around. As you can see here, this part of Cyprus is less developed than the free part of Cyprus. Turkey really does a lot of the support here, including sending in water. There's some kind of undeveloped areas which are kind of interesting to see, and you can see here we're driving up to St. Hilarions Castle, which is an interesting landmark. And yeah, very much more country-like. A lot of people say that this is what Cyprus used to be like, you know, 30, 40 years ago. It's kind of a little bit of a time machine. Here we have a relic from the Turkish invasion of Cyprus. This is a tank that somehow got stuck here, and there's a whole plaque memorializing the soldiers here, the daringness and boldness particular to Turks, as it says here, and of course the Turkish version of Cypriot history, which paints the Greek Cypriots as occupiers, persecutors, so on and so forth. Well, that is their version of events. Here we are driving up to St. Hilarion Castle, which, by the way, is a medieval era castle that is considered to have been used as the model for the Disney logo. These roads are very narrow and dangerous to drive on. You have to honk when you're coming around a bend in order to not end up in a head-on collision with somebody. Fortunately, my host did the driving, so that was nice. The Crusaders have been here, and of course, this was part of the Byzantine Empire. This is why there's a Greek Orthodox church over here, and it's very, very beautiful. It's up on a mountain. I mean, this is very similar to what you see in places like Meteora in Greece. And there was a strategic reason for being so high up. I mean, you weren't attacked by anybody. It was very difficult. It was easy to resist an invader. So again, lots of relics from that castle where a Saint Hilarion is said to have lived. You could see Cyprus from this elevation, and we're looking here toward the west of Cyprus, which is toward the free part, the unoccupied part of Cyprus, which somewhere over further out there begins. Very breathtaking up here, very beautiful, and over here you see again these beautiful views through the remnants of the medieval castle. This is a view toward the north, which is where Kyrenia is. So this looks up to the north toward Turkey, and this here is a little cardboard cutout telling you that you're at the very, very top of the mountain. It's 732 meters, so that's not a very big elevation according to many standards. But you see, there are these little interesting little. These are papers to water bottles or plastics to water bottles that have been tied to the plant. I've seen that actually in other parts of Cyprus as well, and Paphos specifically. Seems like a Cypriot thing. Here, there's someone wrote Cyprus is Bulgarian. So as you can see, the Bulgarians are also trying to lay claim to Cyprus. Interesting. Here's a bunch of tourists. As you can see here, there are quite a few European faces over here. There's quite a sizable British expat contingent over here and British tourists that come here. So much so that people even duel out over the whole Brexit issue over here, which is a pretty interesting thing. And over here you see two flags from a Turkish military base. There are quite a few of them out on the island. Quite a large, sizable presence of Turkish troops here. And, you know, you're not supposed to photograph this, of course, but from a distance, what the hell are they going to do, right? And when you drive by the base, you see a big bronze face of Ataturk, which looks pretty intimidating, as well as this sign over here, which says, you know, basically, forbidden zone, stay away. And interestingly enough, the very first row of lettering is in Turkish, after that in English, then in French, then in German, and only then at the very end do you see it in Greek, which is quite telling of the attitude here. Here we are on our way back from St. Hilarion's Castle to Kyrenia, which the Turks call Gürne, and we're going to see a local market where you're going to get a little bit of a smattering of the kind of people that live here right now. This local market has fruits, vegetables, nuts, and other kind of small doodads. A lot of this stuff, I'd say probably most of it comes from Turkey. It could be from other countries, but it has to go through Turkey because there are sanctions here, and you cannot directly deal with the so-called TRNC, Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, which nobody recognizes except for Turkey. So you see different faces, including some European faces here, and basically what's going on here is you have Turkish Cypriots that live here still, although some would even argue that the most Turkish Cypriots, according to some people, even left the occupied part of Cyprus. You have mainland settlers from Turkey who came to live here since 1974, when the Turkish government would basically, in some cases, forcefully settle them over here. And then you have a lot of, this is kind of a more recent phenomenon, especially once in 2003 there was an opening of the crossings. You have so-called downshifters. You have people who come from Europe, including former Soviet Union, which basically they do something called geo-arbitrage. They have income coming either from a pension or from real estate, or in some cases both. And because of the fact that the income is from a higher income country, they're able to come over here where things are subsidized by the Turkish government and enjoy a standard of living passively. They don't have to work, and basically that they're fine with that. Of course, it's a very sensitive subject because about 80% of this land used to belong to Greek Cypriots, and it was taken from them without any form of compensation. As a result, that's obviously a very sensitive subject, and it is actually also illegal to buy property here. You can be sued through a European court, and although in practice that rarely actually happens. Well, here I am in Nicosia, or Lefkosia, as the Turks call this part. This is the occupied part, and I will be going back to the free part in just a bit. There's a statue of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the figure that is very highly revered here and probably is more popular than Vladimir Lenin in the Soviet Union. He's just everywhere. Can't get away from him. Statues, portraits, you name it. Yeah, that's the way it is here. As you can see here, the streets are very, very narrow. This is the older part of the city, and apparently there's an agreement, there's a rule rather, not to renovate buildings here. So you see a lot of buildings here are pretty old and decrepit, and that's just the way they seem to have decided to do things here for whatever reason that is. And here we see a UN buffer zone. Don't want to get too close to this because it might provoke problems. It's also eerily quiet over here, just like it was on the other side. Also, just like on the other side, a lot of metal shops, car repair shops, stuff like that right here. Okay, here we are. This is it. This is the final crossing point right here at Ledra. All right, now I am actually in no man's land. I'm in the UN zone, and right now I'm going to be at the Republic's border in just a second. Well, that was certainly easy. Check your passport very casually, scan it, and that's it, and you're done. So now I'm back in the Free Republic of Cyprus, and wow, that was quite an experience. once you cross over back into the unoccupied part, you can see a pretty significant jump in the quality of stores, restaurants, and so on and so forth here on Ledger Street, which is a major shopping and tourist area. There's some really charming places over here. It's a very nice, cozy atmosphere over here, I would describe it. You have a lot of shops where you can buy trinkets and stuff. Obviously, a lot of good restaurants and little cafes and stuff like that. It's really nice over here. And dare I say, a very different character than what is across the crossing over there on the other side. I didn't cross back into the occupied part after this, but I did come close to it in a couple of places, which I'll show you right now. Here we are in Porphyra. This is the most northwestern part of Cyprus, and one of the few parts of the north that is still controlled by the Republic of Cyprus. Over there we see little rainstorms there, so that's going to have to put a little cap on some of my plans of exploring here for a bit. And that tip over there that you see all the way over there, that part, a little small part, is actually occupied by Turkey still. There's a small little slice over there where they had a military base, and that's still occupied. So that little ridge over there is occupied. Then there's a UN buffer zone, and then, you know, the Republic controls a certain distance, and then after that the occupied northern part begins over there. So that's kind of how it works out over here. I had a lot of wind over here when I was recording this, so you won't be able to hear me, but basically this is the most northern part of Cyprus that is not occupied, right here. And kind of sandwiched, there's like a little enclave that is occupied by the Turks, of Kokino, which they actually had occupied before the major operation in 1974. And it still exists as a separate exclave, which is not connected in any way to the greater occupied northern part. So that's still there, and you can even hear the call from prayer where I was standing. There's a UN buffer zone that you drive by, and that's basically primarily a military installment for Turkey. So, and even Erdogan has come and visited there apparently. So, yeah, there's nobody really living there from what I know, and I don't believe there's any way of crossing into there unless you're, you know, involved in diplomatic stuff or whatever it is. So that's that area right there, and it borders the sea, of course. My next excursion to the occupied region, but not inside of it, was a neutral village called Pila. Pila is actually located within the UN buffer zone. So in a sense, it's kind of like the old Cyprus of pre-invasion, where Greek and Turkish Cypriot communities live together in one town, or village, I guess you would call this. And it's administered by the United Nations, so the Cypriot government doesn't officially administer it, but when you enter it from the side controlled by the Cypriot government, there is no checkpoint or anything like that. However, once you arrive to the area that's occupied by the Turkish army, that is already a checkpoint area. So you can kind of freely go. There's just a sign here, as you can see, that says that you're in the United Nations buffer zone here. And the only thing that really changes is that the UN basically is the police here and the authority officially. So if you drive a little further down the road, you can see those two minarets there from a mosque. I believe that it was actually once a Christian church. I don't know if it was Orthodox or Catholic, but bottom line is that you see there's this mosque over there, and that already marks the beginning of the occupied area, and there will be a checkpoint, which you see right here. So if you want to cross over into the occupied part, you got to buy insurance, and that's what this guy apparently sells. So this here in back of me is a Turkish-owned place, and I can hear the guys playing some board game. And there's a Greek-owned place right there, and they're right next to each other. So this is how people live here. You know, this is the way it's been since '74. They've had this in this buffer zone, and somehow, I guess the UN is here, so there are no problems. So this is like the old Cyprus, where you have signs in Turkish and in Greek. If someone's a Greek-owned business, they're going to have signs in Greek. Someone's a Turk, they're going to have Turkish signs. That's kind of how it is here. And there is a Greek Orthodox church, and here is a somewhat smaller Greek Orthodox church. And by the way, I just noticed that this church is dedicated to St. George, my saint. Very, very appropriate to have a warrior saint in these parts. So right behind me is the entrance to the bigger Greek church you just saw, and unfortunately I see some broken glass there behind me. Hope that's not intentional vandalism. So this is what it's like to live in a divided country. This is a buffer area. Over there, I believe that's already occupied, or, past those houses, that's where you'll see. It's usually like mountains and stuff. That's what usually borders these areas. So you have both Greeks and Turks living here. I don't know how grouped they are in terms of, are the houses right next to each other, or are they kind of in their little groups? Don't know that. Should have taken a guided tour here, actually. I noticed a bunch of tourists here. You may have seen them earlier. So very quiet, just like a lot of Cyprus is. It's very quiet. Not a lot of noise here. You don't hear people. You don't see a lot of people. It's a pretty dead area. Frankly, I don't know what people really do here. It's, you just don't see any signs of life. So seeing a lot of probably more Greek signs than Turkish signs here, which again is representative of the demographics that were the case back in the pre-1974 era. There is a casino. I don't know if it's operated by Greeks or Turks. The signs are all in English, as they tend to usually be. Casinos are really big in the occupied area because that's like one of the main sources of income that they have. But here we're in the buffer zone and they have it too. The official signs, as you can see, are in Greek, in Turkish, and in English. So that's kind of the old-fashioned way. All right, so just like that, we're out of the UN buffer zone and back in the Republic of Cyprus. Not much going on there, pretty quiet. And you definitely feel that, things are all, private-owned businesses all have their own signs of their respective languages of who owns them. They don't do this bilingual business. That's only on the official level. So, I don't know, maybe a little sign there about the fact that people are not exactly into kumbaya necessarily. That's probably a conclusion I'm starting to increasingly come away with, and not a surprising one, I'll say that much. This here is filmed from the sovereign base area, which belongs to the United Kingdom at the moment, and it's bordering the Turkish-occupied part of Famagusta, which is Amohostos in Greek. This looks like a totally abandoned village. Looks like war hit it, and there's nobody there. There's an empty church over there you could see. Very depressing to see that. And there was no British military personnel here at all whatsoever. I mean, I was very close to the demarcation line, and, nobody was interested in what I was doing there or anything like that. Only, there's obviously that pillbox there where you see there were Turkish military in there. So that's my journey. Well, what can I say? I'm sure some people are not happy that I went to the occupied part, but if it'll make them feel any better, I calculated how much money I spent in the occupied part, and then I contributed that sum plus some more to Greek Cypriot charity. So I think I did what was just and what was correct. I did it not because I wanted to get cheap subsidized tourism, but because I wanted to get an idea of what it's like to be in an occupied area of a country. So, what can I say? It's a solution I don't see coming anytime soon in terms of trying to have any kind of reconciliation. It's very difficult. A lot of people have said much about it, but at the end of the day, it's in deadlock, and I don't see any progress being made right now. Maybe there'll be some kind of big change later on in the geopolitical game, but who knows if that'll be good or bad, and what that's going to mean for each side. They're going to have to decide that for themselves, I guess, when that time comes, and if it comes.